Hi everyone, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Carr. It was great speaking to some of the parents and children over the last couple of days. It's fantastic news that you're all still safe and well. Keep washing your hands. As you can see, the classroom is a lot quieter without you. Anyway, without further ado, let's carry on with the story. But even with Mr. Reynolds, that still leaves one boy unaccounted for, Miss Roberts insisted. That'll be all right, you'll see, my dear. We'll find him somewhere, poor little scrap. Tucky leaned closer to David. Davy, if they can't find anyone to look after us, will they send us home, do you think? Doubt it. But what will they do with us then? Miss Roberts will see us all right, David said hopefully. Don't worry, she'll see to it. Davy, why do you think no one chose us? Tucky droned on in his flat voice. They didn't choose me because you were sitting next to me, and they didn't choose you because I was sitting next to you. And besides, we're not the prettiest in the class, are we? He tried to joke it away, but he was hurt inside just as Tucky was. Time and time again, people had looked him over and passed him by. Anyway, he went on, didn't much like the look of them. Nor me, said Tucky. Nor me. The arguing at the other end of the hall had dwindled to an inaudible whisper. Now, as they all realised, the two boys might overhear them. But the longer it went on, the more obvious it became that the situation was serious. No one else seemed to have room for an evacuee, and it looked very much as if Mr. Reynolds might not be coming at all. Finally, Miss Roberts suggested that they should give the boys a bed in the hall for the night, and someone went off to look for mattresses and blankets. Miss Hardy looked as if she would burst into tears at any minute, and Miss Evers kept throwing up her hands in disgust. Meanwhile, David and Tucky sat alone up on the platform, too tired and bewildered even to care what had happened to them. They had pulled away the chairs to make room for the newly arrived mattresses and bedding when the hall door banged open. A huge, bearded man in a great woolly coat and knee-high gaiters strode into the hall, followed by a rangy-looking black and white sheepdog. Everyone gawped. Sorry to be late, but I've come for a boy. You are Mr. Reynolds, I presume. Miss Evers' voice was stiff with anger. I am, my dear, and who may you be? Mr. Reynolds, these children have been up over 15 hours now. Miss Roberts took Miss Evers' arm to stop her, but Miss Evers would go on. They have travelled 300 miles, and you keep them waiting for another 2 hours or more, and all you can say is you're sorry? Mr. Reynolds looked down at Miss Evers. Lady, I've said I'm sorry. Nothing more I can say if that won't satisfy you. Then he looked up at the platform and walked towards the two boys who had stood up by this time. The dog followed and sat down by Mr. Reynolds' feet, looking up at them. Sorry to keep you, he said, looking from one to the other. He had bright blue eyes, and the lines on his face disappeared into a beard that was flecked with white at the chin. There was wet mud down the front of his coat, and David noticed a broad gold wedding ring on his hand as he ruffled the dog's neck. 'Twas the mare that did it. She foaled just half an hour ago, and I couldn't leave her. She had a bit of trouble, always does this one, but we managed between us, and 'tis a good-looking foal, another colt though. 5 foals she's had, and not a filly among 'em. Filly? Said Tucker. What's that? Horse, me dear, said Mr. Reynolds. His face creased into a smile. Filly's a girl horse, colt's a boy, like yourself. Mr. Reynolds, one of the village ladies came up beside him. Mr. Reynolds, which one will you have? Which one? You put yourself down for one, Mr. Reynolds. You said you only had room for one. You want me to choose between these two boys, is that it? No one replied. He looked from David to Tucky and back again to David. 'Tis just like market day, he said, shaking his head. Mr. Reynolds! Miss Evers stamped her foot in fury. This one's fatter, Mr. Reynolds went on, looking at Tucky. But then this one's taller. He reached out and gripped David's arm. He's a bit skinny, though. You know, not much meat on him. Mr. Reynolds, this is a serious matter, said Miss Evers. You're right, lady, no doubt about it. 'Tis a serious matter, I'm supposed to look at two young lads face to face, mind you, and then pick out one and not the other? Right enough, that's serious. 'Tis revolting, that's what it is. And what happens to the one I don't choose, eh? How do you think he'll feel? As a matter of fact, said Miss Roberts quickly, we don't know what will happen to him. You don't know? Apparently there's been a mistake, a muddle over numbers, and one of these two boys has nowhere to go. Not yet, anyway. I don't suppose you'd consider taking them both on, would you? They're great friends at school, and we'd be very obliged. Friends, are they? Mr. Reynolds considered the two boys carefully and read each of their placards slowly, stroking his dog all the time. Tell you one thing for certain, it'll be both of them or neither. There'll be no choosing. What about asking them? They might not like the look of me. You thought of that? No one said anything, so he asked them direct. Well, what do you think? I'm a farmer, 42 years old, married, no children. My name's Jerry Reynolds. I own 96 acres, barley, sheep, milking cows, a few beef cattle, and since the war began, a few acres of potatoes. It's only a small cottage, and you'll have to share one bed and do your bit about the farm. Well, what do you say? Tookie looked at David, and David looked back at him. It was the first good moment of the day. Each understood instinctively what the other wanted. We'll go with you, mister, David said. Mr. Reynolds, my dear, that's what you'll call me, and I'll be glad to have you both. Now, take those things off around your necks and get down here. You're giving me a crick of my neck talking up to you like this. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, said Miss Roberts, shaking him by the hand. I've been their head mistress up until now, and they'll do you proud. You won't regret it. Oh, you hope not, Mr. Reynolds said. Come on then, you two, we'll be off. Haven't had my dinner yet. First the lambing, then that confounded mare. Quite put me out, it has. The dog followed him towards the door. Mr. Reynolds, it was Miss Evers again, you must register before you take them. Register? It's regulations, Miss Evers said icily. We have to know where the children are. But you know that already, my dear. Mr. Reynolds smiled down at her. They'll be staying with us at Hamley Farm. Now, you put that in your register, my dear. Good night to you. Anyone who put Miss Evers in her place was all right with David and Tookie. It was cold outside and drizzling, and the boys pulled their coats around their legs inside the van and huddled together on the front seat. The van smelt like an animal, and as Mr. Reynolds banged the door and got in beside them, they heard a rustle behind them. David twisted round in his seat and peered into the darkness. One of my orphan lambs, said Mr. Reynolds. Mother died this morning. I couldn't persuade any of the other ewes to take him on. He keeps warm in the back there, plenty of straw. That dog, said Tookie. Where's that dog? Jip? He never comes in the car, he don't trust it. He'll follow along behind, he always does. The van started up with a rattle. Comfortable? Yes, thanks, mister, said Tookie. 'Tis Mr. Reynolds, Tookie. Can you remember that? So here we are, guys. That's it. That's the end of part 3. Join me tomorrow for the next instalment in our adventure. Here I am in the yard. It's clearly time to go home. Enjoy your evening. Speak to you soon.